The alien commander stood before the High Council, his uniform torn, armor scorched, and one of his arms wrapped in strange, human-made bandages. His voice was calm, but his eyes told a different story, one filled with fear, confusion, and shame. He began his report with words no one expected. "We believed humans were weak. We believed they would fall quickly. We were wrong. We barely escaped with our lives." The council chamber fell silent. Not even the advisors or the guards moved. The Velari Dominion had conquered dozens of species across the galaxy. No army had ever pushed them back. But this time, something had gone wrong. The commander, known as Vorikjen, continued speaking. He explained how the mission began, a routine scouting operation. A human signal was detected near the edge of Velari territory. Weak, unguarded, and filled with what seemed like low-level communication, curiosity turned to opportunity. The council approved a quiet insertion. No full invasion, just a simple capture and study mission. No weapons were needed, they believed. Humans were thought to be primitive, emotional, disorganized. The perfect prey. Zhen's ship, the Dreadclaw, jumped into human space with 2 support vessels. The plan was simple. Scan the human colony, enter silently, gather samples, and leave. No need for force. No need for panic. But from the moment they arrived, things felt off. The human colony was small, sitting quietly on a rocky planet named Vesperanine. It looked weak. No visible defenses, no warships nearby, not even a proper energy shield. It was almost too easy. The Velari ships approached, cloaked and confident. They launched their silent probes, expecting no resistance. But the probes didn't return. At first, Zhen thought it was a system error. Then one of the support ships reported static across all channels. The next moment, their entire navigation screen turned black. Not from a virus, but from a manual signal. Someone had hijacked their comms using basic radio waves. It wasn't advanced, but it was smart. It sent a single image across the screens, a red skull with the words, "We see you." Zhen gave the order to retreat, but it was too late. The human counterattack came fast and brutal. 3 human ships decloaked from the asteroid belt behind them. They were small, built for speed, not power. But they didn't fight like normal enemies. They didn't try to talk. They didn't waste time. They fired with precision. Every blast hit the engines, targeting weak points. The Velari ships were not prepared. One was destroyed in seconds. The other tried to run, only to be pulled in by a magnetic mine that humans had planted days before. It was a trap, a perfect one. The Dreadclaw was hit next. Its left wing tore apart. Fire spread through the lower decks. Zhen ordered emergency landing. They crashed into the rocky mountains near the human base. Smoke filled the air. Metal screamed. Inside, Velari soldiers were injured and panicking. They had never seen anything like this. It was not just a surprise attack. It was a hunt. Hours passed. The wounded were treated. The command center was sealed. Drones were sent out to scan the area. What they found was terrifying. The humans hadn't just trapped the skies. They had rigged the ground too. Hidden sensors, auto turrets buried under rocks, heat-sensitive mines. The humans knew the Velari would come. Somehow, they had predicted it. Then the night came. And so did the humans. Not with war machines, not with tanks or giant walkers like other species. No, these humans moved in small squads, wearing strange armor that blended into the terrain. They moved silently, like shadows. And when they attacked, they didn't just shoot. They used smoke, flash bombs, psychological tricks. One Velari guard was found shaking and crying, saying he had heard voices in the smoke, voices of his dead brother, calling him home. The Velari had better weapons, better armor, better training. But it didn't matter. The humans were unpredictable. One moment they attacked from the north. The next, they were inside the camp, using stolen Velari rifles. At one point, Zhen heard laughter over the intercom. Human laughter, mocking them. Playing music. One song kept repeating over and over. It had drums and screaming and a strange rhythm that made the Velari soldiers nervous. Later, they learned it was called heavy metal, a form of human battle music. For 2 days, the Velari held the crashed ship, but they were being pushed back, piece by piece, not by a large army, but by small teams of humans using dirty, clever, dangerous tactics. When Zhen finally gave the order to evacuate, only 28% of his crew was still alive, and even those were injured. The humans didn't chase them when they fled. They just stood on the ridge, watching. One of them even saluted. The Dread Claw limped into orbit. The humans didn't follow. They had won. Not just the battle, but something worse. They had placed fear in the hearts of the Velari. Zhen turned away from the council now, ashamed. They are not like other species, he said. They do not follow patterns. They break their own rules. They are chaos, and we do not know how to fight chaos. One of the council members asked, "Do you believe they are a threat?" Zhen did not answer immediately. He looked up, eyes filled with something that no Velari had shown before, respect. They are not just a threat. They are the storm we never saw coming. We went to test them, but they tested us. Silence returned to the chamber. And far away, on the rocky hills of Vesperanine, a group of human soldiers stood quietly, watching the sky. Their commander, a woman with tired eyes and a scar down her cheek, turned to her squad and spoke. "They'll be back. But next time, they'll know better." The alien commander, Vorakshen, stood in silence as the stars stretched out before him. His ship, once proud and powerful, now drifted on low power through a cold, empty sector of space. It had been days since the battle on Vesperanine. Days since the humans forced his fleet to retreat. The council had not sent backup. There was no plan to recover the bodies, no mission to strike again. Instead, Zhen was ordered to return home and give a full report. But he couldn't, because something was following them. At first it was just a shadow in the sensor logs, a flicker, a missing ping, something small, possibly a rock or a ghost signal, but it stayed with them. No matter how fast the Dread Claw moved, no matter what course they changed, the shadow stayed close. Zhen ordered his remaining crew to activate the long-range scanners. The results came in, clear and sharp. It was a human ship, small, fast, designed for stealth, and it was not running away. It was following them. This made no sense. Humans didn't chase their enemies into deep space. They were supposed to protect their colonies, not hunt. But here they were, chasing. The Velari ship jumped to another sector, a cold system with no planets and a dying sun, a perfect place to hide and lose any tail. They powered down everything. No lights, no engines. The ship became a piece of silent space junk. They waited. But it didn't help. The human ship appeared again. Zhen watched the monitor, confused and angry. "Why are they doing this?" he asked. "What do they want?" There was no answer. Then, without warning, the Dread Claw's lights shut off. All systems failed. The emergency backup kicked in just seconds before total blackout. Alarms screamed. Power levels dropped. Weapons were offline. Something had hit them. Not a missile, not a laser, but a digital strike. The ship's core had been infected, not with a virus, but with something human. One of the engineers shouted, "We're being hacked." But it was already too late. The screens on the bridge turned red. A message appeared. "Hello again." The same skull. The same human symbol from the colony. Then came the music. That strange, chaotic sound. Drums, screams, noise, blasted through every speaker on the ship. Some of the crew covered their ears. Others collapsed, shaking. The ship AI began repeating a single word over and over. Unknown pattern. Unknown pattern. Unknown pattern. This was psychological warfare. And it was working. Zhen forced himself to think. They had to fight back. He ordered the crew to activate the emergency decoy, a fake signal that would lead the human ship away. It launched successfully, drifting off in the opposite direction, simulating a damaged ship. The human craft paused, then split in two. Zhen's heart stopped. It wasn't one ship, it was two. The Velari were outnumbered, outplayed, and outsmarted. But Zhen wasn't done yet. He ordered full power to engines and steered the ship toward a nearby asteroid field. It was dangerous, but it was their only chance. The Dreadclaw entered the field at full speed, dodging rocks and debris. The human ships followed closely. That's when Zhen saw something unbelievable. The human ships didn't fly like machines. They weaved through the asteroids like animals, like they had instincts. One flew sideways between two spinning rocks. The other vanished, only to reappear above them. It was like they were toying with the Velari. Zhen gave the order. Prepare the core pulse. It was a desperate move, the last resort. The core pulse was a forbidden technology. It used the ship's energy reactor to release a short-range EMP blast. It would disable everything nearby, including their own ship. But if it worked, it would fry the human systems and give them time to escape. The engineer hesitated. Sir, if we use it here, we'll crash. Zhen nodded. Better crash than be hunted. The pulse was charged, then fired. A blinding wave of energy exploded from the Dreadclaw, lighting up the asteroid field. For a second, everything went silent. Then the ship dropped. Systems dead. Engines off. Gravity gone. Zhen and his crew held on as the ship tumbled through space. Sparks flew. Metal groaned. Finally, with a hard slam, the ship crashed into the side of a massive asteroid. It didn't explode, but it was badly damaged. The crew was shaken but alive. Zhen opened the scanners. The human ships were gone. He breathed in relief. We did it. They're gone. But the celebration was short. A soft noise echoed through the lower decks. A clang. Then another. It was not metal shifting. It was footsteps. Zhen's eyes went wide. Boarding party. Somehow, the humans had gotten inside. The Velari soldiers grabbed weapons and moved toward the sound. But the humans didn't attack all at once. They came from the shadows. Smoke filled the halls. One by one, the Velari were taken down. Zhen ran to the escape pod with the last data core. He had to survive. Someone had to tell the council the truth. As he launched the pod, he saw something in the rear camera. A human soldier, standing alone in the smoke, watching. The escape pod floated into space, silent, cold. Zhen looked down at the data in his hands, everything they had seen, everything they had failed to understand. He pressed record and began to speak. If you are hearing this, know that we made a mistake. We believed the humans were a simple species. We thought they could be broken easily, but we were wrong. They are not prey. They are not primitive. They are something else, something more dangerous than we ever imagined. His voice grew quiet. They didn't just fight us. They hunted us. They made us feel fear. And now, they're coming. The escape pod drifted through the cold void of space, its lights flickering in the dim darkness. Inside, Vorik Zhen held the data core close to his chest. He couldn't afford to lose it. Not now. It was the only chance they had to understand what had gone wrong. He had to warn the Dominion. He had to explain what they were up against. But even as he clutched the core, he knew one painful truth. The humans had already won. They had not only driven them away from Vespera 9, but they had left a scar in his mind that would never heal. They had done something no one had ever done before. They had gotten inside his head. As the pod moved deeper into space, Zhen's thoughts turned back to the final moments on the asteroid. He had seen the humans close up for the first time. Their faces, their eyes. They weren't afraid. They didn't look at him with the same fear or respect he'd gotten from other species. No, the humans were different. They enjoyed this. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were enjoying the challenge. Zhen shuddered. It wasn't just that. They had done something worse. As they boarded the ship, the humans didn't use weapons like they expected. No, they attacked with something far more dangerous: psychological warfare. He had seen it in the eyes of his crew. It started with the music. The loud pounding noise that sent waves of panic through the ship. The strange melody that seemed to pulse inside their minds, making them dizzy, disoriented. And then there were the screams, distorted voices that came through the comm system. The voices of their own dead soldiers, echoing through the ship's speakers. Their minds couldn't handle it. And as they struggled, the humans moved in, invisible like ghosts, hunting them down one by one. But there was one thing Zhen could never forget. When he looked into the eyes of the last human soldier standing in the smoke, he had seen something that made him freeze in his tracks. The human wasn't afraid. The soldier was smiling. It was a moment Zhen would never be able to shake. When the pod finally reached the Velari command station, Zhen was escorted into the council chamber. The council members waited in silence, their cold eyes scanning him, waiting for his report. He stood before them, exhausted, battered, and broken. He had seen the horror firsthand. The humans had become something he couldn't explain. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. What could he say? How could he explain the feeling of helplessness they had all felt? The silence stretched on until finally one of the council members, a high-ranking officer named Ralzar, spoke. "You were supposed to bring back knowledge, not failure." "Report, Commander." Zhen looked at the ground. His shoulders sagged. The humans are not like us. They fight differently. They think differently. They've done something to us. Ralzar narrowed his eyes. "Explain." Zhen took a deep breath, pushing the fear away. "We thought we had control. We believed we were the hunters. But they turned it around. They took control. They used fear. They used our own minds against us. It wasn't just the battle. It was how they fought. They knew exactly how to break us, how to make us afraid. They made us doubt ourselves." Ralzar frowned. "Explain further." Zhen continued. "When they boarded the ship, they didn't attack with guns or bombs. They attacked with images, with memories, things that made us doubt who we were. They made us relive our darkest moments, and they twisted our minds, sending us into panic. The humans weren't just soldiers. They were psychologists. They knew how to break the mind. They weren't trying to kill us. They were trying to destroy our will to fight." The room was silent. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a female officer named Ilna, spoke up. "You're telling us the humans fought with psychic weapons. Are you saying they used telepathy or mind control?" Zhen shook his head. "No, not telepathy. But something worse. They used their emotions. Their fear, their anger, their joy. They made us feel their emotion. And that's how they won. They made us feel weak." Ralzar's eyes widened. He turned to the council, his voice cold. "Are we supposed to believe this? That a species that we thought of as primitive and weak has mastered a weapon we've never even seen?" Zhen stood taller, his voice growing stronger. "I know how it sounds, but it's true. They're not weak. They're not chaotic. They're unstoppable. And we are not ready." There was a long pause before the council began to speak among themselves. The air was thick with tension. Ralzar finally broke the silence. "You're dismissed, Commander. We'll discuss your report further. You've done your duty. We'll handle the rest." Zhen's heart sank. It was clear what was coming. The Dominion would not accept failure, especially not from a commander of his rank. He knew the consequences. The council would not just report this to the higher-ups. They would be sending a a message that no one, especially not him, could ignore. As Zhen turned to leave, he could hear the voices of the council behind him. But they weren't speaking to him anymore. They were speaking about him, about his failure, about the humans. Meanwhile, on the human side, Captain Erin Locke sat in her command chair, her fingers drumming lightly on the console. The battle was over, but it wasn't won yet. She had watched Zhen's ship leave Vespera 9, and now she knew what they were planning. The Velari would return. She had to be ready. Her crew had begun to process the data they had taken from the Velari ship. It was a lot, too much to go through quickly. But they were already learning things about the Velari that no one else had known. Their tactics, their weaknesses. They weren't just fighting aliens. They were fighting something they had never seen before, a race that thought it was invincible. Captain Locke stood and walked toward the window, staring out at the stars. She knew they would come back, no matter how many times the Velari were pushed back. They were too strong, too powerful. But this time, the humans would be ready. She wasn't just defending her people anymore. Now she was preparing for the fight of her life. And she wasn't going to make the same mistake Zhen did. The Velari fleet emerged from the depths of the galaxy like a storm, a shadow rising on the horizon of human space. Commander Vorexen stood at the helm of the Dread Claw, looking out through the viewports. His mind was still haunted by the face of the human soldier, the one who had smiled as the Velari retreated. He had to admit, even after everything that had happened, he still didn't understand the humans. But now, he didn't care. His mission was simple: destroy humanity or die trying. There was no other option. His fleet was massive, dozens of warships, each one armed to the teeth. The Council had seen the reports, and they knew the humans were dangerous. But they also knew they couldn't afford to let them think they could defeat the Velari. This time, there would be no retreat. This time, they would crush the humans, once and for all. But as Zhen gave the order to advance into human territory, something strange happened. There was no resistance. No human ships in the immediate vicinity. His fleet moved closer to the heart of human space, their sensors scanning for any signs of an ambush. "Commander," came the voice of his first officer, a young Velari named Vex. "We've scanned the area. There are no human warships, no defenses. This is too easy." Zhen's grip tightened on his chair. "It's a trap. Don't be fooled. They want us to think we're safe." He paused. "They've already studied our tactics. They're waiting." Suddenly, a signal came through the communication channels. A single word flashed on the screen. "Ready." Zhen's heart skipped a beat. He recognized that word. It was a human signal. No matter how hard the Velari tried to decode it, it was always the same message. Ready. The humans were always ready, always waiting. It was the ultimate test of patience. They weren't afraid. They never were. "Prepare for immediate action," Zhen ordered, his voice hard. "Launch the attack." The Velari warships moved forward, weapons charging. Zhen was ready. He had been through this before. He knew how to fight. He knew how to break their defenses. But this time, something felt off. As the first salvo of missiles launched toward a nearby human outpost, the sky seemed to split apart. The first wave of human fighters appeared, moving faster than Zhen's ships could react. There were no large warships, no fleets to fight. Instead, the humans came at them in small, sleek, heavily armed ships. Each one moved with terrifying precision, darting through space like deadly insects. The Velari fire missed, and then the humans attacked. Zhen's flagship, the Dread Claw, was struck first, its shields failing under a barrage of high-energy blasts. It felt like a punch to the chest. The ship lurched as explosions rocked the hull. Zhen's officers scrambled to hold the ship together, but the damage was extensive. "Shields at 40%, cried the tactical officer. "Return fire," Zhen shouted. But before they could react, another wave of human ships arrived, launching missiles with pinpoint accuracy, targeting weak points in the Villari fleet. The humans weren't just attacking, they were outthinking them, using their knowledge of Villari weaknesses to devastating effect. The Villari fleet scrambled to defend itself, but it was clear. The humans were ready. They had anticipated every move, every strategy. They had become masters of the game. And now, they were turning the tables. On the Dreadclaw, Jen's crew was in chaos. The communications were down, and the ship's aid was malfunctioning. One of the secondary bridges was already abandoned due to fire. As Jen ordered the ship to break off and retreat, another blast rocked the vessel. The humans had surrounded them. The retreat was impossible. "We can't get out, sir," the helmsman said, panic creeping into his voice. "We're surrounded." Jen's mind raced. There was no time to think. "Activate the core pulse. Now," he ordered. It was a last-ditch attempt, a powerful EMP blast that would disable everything around them. The ship would be crippled, but it could potentially turn the tide of battle. But just as the command was given, something even more unexpected happened. The human ships, instead of retreating or preparing for another attack, stopped. They slowed down. Jen watched in disbelief as one of the human ships sent a single signal. "We need to talk." A chill ran through Jen. "What does that mean?" He muttered under his breath. His instincts told him to prepare for more violence, but his curiosity began to grow. Humans didn't usually negotiate with enemies. They didn't beg for peace. They were fighters, not diplomats. "Open the comms," Jen ordered. The face of Captain Erin Locke appeared on the screen. She was calm, composed, a stark contrast to the chaos that surrounded Jen's ship. There was no fear in her eyes, only a focused determination. "This is Captain Erin Locke of the United Earth Defense Force," she said, her voice steady. "We have one last chance to do this without more bloodshed. I suggest you listen carefully." Jen's mouth was dry. He had never expected this. He had expected a final, desperate battle, not talking. "You dare speak to me like this after everything you've done?" Locke didn't flinch. "What we've done is defend ourselves. What you've done is invade our home. You attacked us first. Now you want to finish the job. But I'm offering you an alternative." Jen growled. "What could you possibly offer me?" "An end to this war," Locke replied, "but on one condition. We don't want your technology, your territory, or your resources. We want something more valuable. We want peace, and we want it now." Jen's head was spinning. He couldn't understand. How could humans be so calm, so confident? They had been beaten back, chased into the depths of space, and yet they were offering peace. Locke leaned forward. "I know your people. You are warriors, yes, but you are also survivors. You can't keep fighting like this, and neither can we. It's only a matter of time before this entire conflict destroys both our species. So, here's my offer. You leave our space, and we stop hunting you. You retreat, and we stop this war before it gets worse. We have the power to destroy your fleet, but we don't want to. We never did." Jen stared at her, conflicted. He had been trained to fight, to conquer, to never show weakness, and yet here were the humans, standing tall, offering an end to the madness. It didn't make sense. It didn't fit the narrative he had been raised on. The idea that his fleet could be destroyed, that they could lose, it was more than just defeat. It was a humiliation. Jen opened his mouth to reject her offer, but then he remembered Vesperanine. He remembered the humans not just fighting, but thinking, adapting, and overcoming. He remembered their strategy. And for the first time, he realized something he hadn't before. Humans didn't fight like other species. They fought with their minds. And that was something the Villari had underestimated. For the first time, Jen paused. He looked at the calm, confident eyes of Captain Locke. She was offering him a way out, a way to stop the bloodshed, to save what was left of his fleet. Maybe, just maybe, this was the way forward. Maybe it was time to put down the weapons. Zhen finally spoke, his voice heavy. I'll speak to my council. The battle had ended, not in destruction, but in something far more unexpected. The war between humanity and the Velari might have reached its end. But for Zhen, the real fight had only just begun, the fight to change the way his people saw the universe. In the aftermath of the battle, the once proud and menacing Velari fleet slowly began to retreat from human space, its once shining ships battered and scarred. The Dread Claw, Zhen's flagship, limped back to the outer rim of the galaxy, a shadow of its former self. For the first time, the Velari were retreating, truly retreating, and the humans were letting them go. Captain Erin Locke stood on the bridge of the Freedom's Edge, her hands behind her back, as she watched the retreating Velari fleet disappear into the vastness of space. The silence that followed the battle was deafening. It wasn't a silence of victory. It was a silence of uncertainty. They had won, yes, but the war wasn't truly over. Not yet. Are we really going to let them go? One of her officers, Lieutenant Daniels, asked from the side. I mean, after everything they've done. Locke turned to him, her eyes cold and focused. We didn't win to destroy them, Daniels. We won to stop the killing, to stop the war. Now we have to show them that we can be better. We have to prove that we're the ones who'll make the future different. Daniels didn't reply. He knew Locke's mind. He knew what she meant, even if the rest of the crew didn't fully understand. The humans had won. But this was no ordinary victory. It wasn't about revenge or domination. It was about a new beginning, one where the human race could stand tall without fear of annihilation. Across the galaxy, the Velari Council convened in a cold, dimly lit room. The once great leaders of the Dominion sat in silence, their faces expressionless, as they stared at the data readouts in front of them. The decision had been made. Zhen had already reported his findings, and the message had been clear. There was no more need for bloodshed. The council leader, Ralzar, stood slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the room. His voice was low, grave. The humans have proven themselves. They have the strength to defeat us. They have the courage to negotiate for peace. And most importantly, they have something we never truly understood. They fight not just with weapons, but with their minds. They adapt and they learn. We underestimated them. But now, he paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. Now we must adapt as well. We cannot afford to let our pride destroy us. The Velari Dominion will no longer seek conquest. We will seek peace. We will learn from our mistakes. The room was silent again, but this time, the silence wasn't full of uncertainty. It was a silence of understanding. For the first time, the Velari were questioning everything they had been taught. They had seen a strength in humanity that was unlike anything they had ever encountered. And for the first time, they weren't the victors. They weren't the unstoppable force. They were the ones who had been humbled. Zhen stood in the command center of the Dread Claw, watching the last of the human ships fade into the distance. His mind was a storm of thoughts. He had always believed that power and fear were the keys to survival. That conquest was the ultimate goal. But now he saw the truth. It wasn't power or fear that made a species strong. It was their will. The humans had something he had never understood before, something that had been hidden beneath their violence, their wars, their chaos. Humanity had hope. Zhen had fought for years, but the humans had fought for something greater. They fought for each other, for their survival, for the future. It was a strange thing to see, this strange force of unity and willpower. The Velari had always been a race of individuals, each soldier driven by their own ambition. But humanity was different. He thought back to the last words of Captain Locke, her voice strong, unwavering. We didn't win to destroy them. We won to stop the killing. And then, the peace. The peace that Zhen wasn't sure could ever truly happen, but which Locke had promised. She had shown him what it could look like, what it could feel like. And despite the scars of war, despite the violence and death, he began to understand the true cost of a fight, the true meaning of peace. As the Dreadclaw began its journey toward the outer colonies, Jean walked slowly through the corridors of the ship, his thoughts still in turmoil. He could hear the voices of his crew, talking about repairs and what came next, but none of it mattered. For the first time in his life, Jean wasn't sure what came next. He had spent so long fighting for victory, for conquest, that he had never once asked what he would do when it was all over. Now, as the ship floated through the cold void, Jean had no answers, only questions. In human space, Captain Locke sat alone in her quarters, staring at the stars outside. The war was over. It was a victory. But she knew better than anyone that peace wasn't just about stopping a war. It was about building something new, something lasting. She had already begun working with the government, trying to find ways to help the Velari understand the human way of life, trying to find common ground in a galaxy that had been torn apart by fear and violence. But it wouldn't be easy. The scars of war ran deep. There were factions within humanity, just as there were factions within the Velari. Some wanted vengeance, others wanted to rebuild, and while Locke knew what her duty was, she also knew that peace required more than just stopping the violence. It required trust, and trust was something that couldn't be built in a day. As she sat at her desk, a message came through on the comms. It was from Jean. The screen flickered, and his face appeared. He looked tired, but his eyes held something different now, something that hadn't been there before. Respect. It was a small thing, but it was enough. "I've reported to the Dominion," Jean said. "They've agreed to the ceasefire. We are no longer a threat to you, Captain. You've changed us. The Velari will no longer seek to conquer your people. We will seek peace." Locke's heart skipped a beat. She had expected resistance, anger, maybe even regret. But this was something else. It wasn't just an agreement. It was an admission. "Thank you, Jean," Locke said softly. "I hope this is just the beginning of something better." Jean nodded, his expression unreadable. "It is, for both of us." The connection cut off, and Locke leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen. It was done. The war was over, but in its place, a new beginning had emerged. The question now was whether humanity and the Velari could find a way to build a lasting peace. The stars outside the window seemed to shine brighter than they had before. For the first time, both sides had learned to see the value in each other. And in that, there was hope.